This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with Ordinance number 20-16, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. Opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting will be posted on the albemarle.org community county calendar when available. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Planning Commission, April 6, 2021, 6 o'clock electronic meeting. And if you would please call the order so we know if we have a quorum.
Mr. Claiborne.
Present.
Miss Moore.
Present.
Mr. Bivens.
Here.
Mr. Randolph.
Present.
Ms. Firehawk.
Here.
And Mr. Keller.
Present.
Mr. Bailey is absent. Thank you.
Okay. Are there matters not listed on the agenda from the public this evening?
No one has their hand raised.
Thank you very much. I have an item on the consent agenda. Would any commissioner like to pull that item? Okay. Is there a motion to accept?
So move.
So move. Is there a second?
Second.
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 Oh, wow.
Everyone
wants to second that.
Okay.
Okay, seconded by Rick. Is there any further discussion? May we have the roll for vote, please?
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Ms. Firehawk.
Aye.
Mr. Randolph.
Aye.
Mr. Bivens.
Yes, aye.
Ms. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's passed, and we'll move that straight on. So those of you who thought we were going to have our Central Virginia spring, I'm glad you enjoyed it for 2 weeks because it's summer now. Yeah, it's April the 6th and it's already 80 degrees. You wonder about that climate action plan, former supervisor. So we'll open our public hearing tonight with project ZTA 2019-08, section 33, zoning text amendments, zoning map amendments, special use permits, and special exceptions. It covers the full scope and gams of everything that we do as a commission. May we have the staff report, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Bivens. I'm Bill Fritz. I'm the Development Process Manager in Community Development. And this is a public hearing to discuss the potential amendments to Section 33. That's how I'm going to continue to refer to this. But as you say, it covers the procedures, submittal requirements, and everything associated with legislative action, zoning text amendments, zoning map amendments, special use permits, and special exception. In your packet is the proposed ordinance that includes potential amendment language. I want to note that there's a typo at the top of that. It says it was prepared in 2010. It was in fact prepared in 2021. I have done that on virtually every document. For some reason where I've rolled over, I've changed it to 2010 instead of 2021. So yeah, one of these days I'll get it right. So just you all heard this back in January, but for the benefit of the public, these amendments correct some existing and previous errors and references within the ordinance. It clarifies procedures to determine if any application is complete or incomplete. It adds some non-severability language to conditions associated with a special exception. It allows for the review of projects when they've been deferred. It provides that once an application is deferred, when it's reactivated, that the timeline for review is reset and that we can collect new fees for a reactivated application. It also provides that an application is deemed withdrawn if a deferral request is accepted and the project is not reactivated within 6 months. In January, the Planning Commission held a work session to discuss this zoning text amendment. At the request of the Planning Commission, staff prepared a brief summary of the history of Section 33, and that's included in your packet. And it's just for information. It's a general summary. This information was also provided to the Board of Supervisors for their work session in February. At the January meeting, the Planning Commission supported the proposed amendment and requested that the language add a provision to allow the Planning Commission to defer an application at the request of an applicant, a provision to consider equity when evaluating an application, and that cultural and heritage resources be included as a type of study that may be required when submitting a special use permit or a zoning map amendment. The board held a work session in February. They endorsed the Planning Commission comments. They made specific comments about provision to include equity also. All of these changes have been made to the ordinance. Just to give you some background, the ordinance was amended in 2018, and it was necessary to fix deficiencies that had been identified in the ordinance and to improve the process. Unfortunately, it didn't quite have the desired effect. In fact, some of the changes made the administration of the ordinance much more complex and resource consumptive. There was some desire to simply repeal the 2018 ordinance and go back to what we had prior to 2018. We've not done that. There was a need to amend the ordinance. If we went back to the pre-2018, there would still be a need to amend. So we tried to fix it. So that's what this does. So some of these changes, just going to go through these real quick, and I can answer questions on anything at any point. So it reorganizes the ordinance. It does not restore the organization to the pre-2018. It builds on some of the lessons we've learned and changes things around. Time limits for actions. That was a big issue in 2018. The amendment in 2018 created a 36-month time limit. Everything had to be acted on within 36 months, except for special exceptions. They're a slightly different creature. The process involved with this time limit was very complex and created a significant administrative burden. The proposed amendment removes this time limit and replaces it with a clear statement that the county is not obligated to accept a request for deferral. The proposed amendment also clarifies procedures for reactivating applications and reviews of applications when they're in a state of deferral. It also fixes some problems with the procedure. Currently, a deferred application isn't supposed to be reviewed, but that's the primary purpose of a deferral, to allow issues to be identified and addressed. The proposed amendment clarifies that the public hearing is deferred, but not the review. The proposed ordinance provides that once the deferred application is reactivated, the timeline for review is reset. The current ordinance creates a procedural problem for determining what the timelines are for a deferred application when it's reactivated. The proposed ordinance allows for collection of a new fee for a reactivated application. We believe this to be important because a reactivated application may contain so much new information that it's essentially a new application. The proposed ordinance provides that an application is deemed withdrawn if a deferral request is accepted and the project is not reactivated within 6 months. This will provide a much easier way to administer the process and prevent applications from lingering. I want to build on this a little bit. I've had some communications with members of the public about this issue of getting rid of the 36-month and whether or not projects would sit out there and linger and just go on forever, which was a problem before 2018. And the ordinance very clearly says if we accept a request for deferral, which we're not obligated to do, and you don't reactivate it within 6 months, it goes away with no further action. It's deemed withdrawn. If we think a particular application is deserving of deferrals and going much longer than 36 months, we can now do that. The 36-month was a one-size-fits-all solution to a problem. And what we're trying to do now is have a right-size solution to the problem. A simple project where they're just deferring, at some point the county is going to say, no, we're going to act on this. But a major project for 2,000 units and 500,000 square feet of industrial, it might be appropriate to grant longer deferrals. So we think this is a much better way of administering the ordinance. Submittal requirements. In the 2018 amendments modified the submittal requirements and allowed the planning director to determine that some information may not be required in certain application. The proposed amendments that you have tonight retain the submittal requirements, and they clarify the process for determining what information is required. We keep the 2018 addition of being allowed to accept electronic submissions, so we maintain that. We maintain the notice to easement holders, so there's no change there. That was a big issue in 2018. The 2018 amendments adopted revised procedures for the rejection of incomplete applications, but these amendments were inadequate. The proposed amendments clarify the timelines. They actually include a provision to notify the applicant, which the current ordinance does not have. It clarifies the collection of fees and the establishment of the start date to calculate the time for review. So it fixes some issues that we had. There were changes to the state code. We've made those changes to the ordinance. The 2018 amendment added a provision to allow the revocation of a special exception. That's been maintained. The proposed ordinance adds non-severability language to conditions associated with the special exception, so that if one of them is found to be invalid, the whole special exception is deemed to be invalid. It removes a reference to judicial review of denied applications. This is because the 2018 added it, but it's a self-executing provision of the state code. So we're not changing anything with that. It's still permitted. Community meetings, the 2018 amendment allowed the planning director to require additional community meetings. The proposed amendments retain that, but they also strengthen those provisions to make it much clearer and much easier for the planning director to do that. Another significant issue we identified with the 2018 amendment was that there were internal errors in the ordinance where it told you that this particular thing would be reviewed for compliance with section ABC, and you went to ABC and it dealt with something, it dealt with historic taverns and inns, something that was totally disassociated from the processing of a special use permit. So we have fixed all those internal errors. You may have noticed that the report that you were given actually has links within it. We're going to try to do that in the future so that when you are reviewing it, you can jump to the internal references within the ordinance. So for example, the ordinance might say, in one section, it might say, public notice shall be provided, public notice shall be given as provided in 33.11. Well, if you just click 3311, it'll take you directly to that notice provision. And we do that so we don't have to restate the notice provision in the rezonings, in the special use permits, and so on and so forth. So it shortens the ordinance and makes it more concise. That's what we have for you. We're recommending approval of the zoning text amendment, and we request that the Planning Commission recommend approval of ZTA 2019-08. Right now, this is scheduled to be heard by the board on June 2nd, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for Mr. Fitz? I see a question. Yes, Rick.
Bill, the first thing I want to say is I think you've done an incredible job, and staff as well, in pulling this all together. This has not been an easy process, I know, having been with the process since 2012. And as you said, the law of unintended consequence reared its ugly head after 2018. But really, we went in, all of us, board and planning commission, went into that with the best of intentions, and then problems arose that one never really suspected would. There are two things that I wanted to bring up. The first, you mentioned on Friday when we had a chance to have some time together as we went down in the southern portion of the Scottsville district. And that is about equity. And Andy, I'm going to appeal to you on this. My understanding is that by state law, the Board of Supervisors is under an obligation to avoid at all times engaging in any actions that can be reasonably construed as being arbitrary, unreasonable, and capricious. Is that not correct, Andy?
Well, Mr. Randolph, what that does is if the planning commission or the board engages in those actions, it certainly subjects the ordinances that are passed to greater legal challenge. If the standard, if an ordinance or a decision of the board is deemed arbitrary or capricious, that makes it subject to legal challenge.
Correct. So under normal operating procedures, I certainly know firsthand that the board deliberates very carefully to undertake any action that could in any way enter the county into a zone where another legal party could construe the county's actions as in fact being arbitrary and unreasonable and capricious. Where I'm going with this, it seems like I'm off into never legal land here, but I actually have a purpose in posing this question. My understanding is that those terms of unreasonable and arbitrary also in some sense address the concept of equity, and that is the obligation of the county to undertake actions that are equal and fair to all parties. And my aspiration in bringing this up is to say that rather than just putting in a clause, as the board has suggested, stating that in all decisions undertaken for zoning text amendments, zoning map amendments, special use permits, and special exceptions, that the county policy is to affirm equity. I would hope that what we would do is really have a sentence in there that would state that the intent of the board is always to avoid undertaking any decisions that can appear to be arbitrary, unreasonable, and capricious. And that is basically a statement of trying to avoid negative legal behavior, arbitrary, unreasonable, and capricious. Nobody walks around and says, oh yeah, today I want to be arbitrary. I thought it'd be also capricious. How about you, Tim? Yeah, why don't you be unreasonable and capricious too? We don't do that. So those are negatives we seek to avoid, whereas equity is a positive that we're aspiring towards. So I would add to the sentence of avoid undertaking any decisions that can appear to be arbitrary, unreasonable, and capricious, to say, and to seek simultaneously and independently to promote equity in all decisions. It then makes it clear what we're talking about in terms of equity, and that in some sense it is linked to the negative behavior we seek to avoid, which is conduct which is arbitrary, unreasonable, and capricious. Just a thought, rather than just saying equity, because equity, it is legally defined as that which is equitable or fair, or the state of being equal or fair. But what we're really talking about is when we go ahead and make decisions that we seek to promote equity in all those decisions. We're trying to make sure that the decisions we undertake factor in equity. So that's one thought. The second thought I had in here, it relates to, let me find the exact passage, Bill. And go. It was about, I think it was special use permits. I noted it here, and now it's not boldly identified. Oh, here we go. Yeah, on page 9, we indicate in terms of the topology that's there, there are no X's for planned development districts and neighborhood model districts, for concept plans, as applicable, a concept plan showing as applicable. And here's the point I would like to make in this section. When, and Karen, you may well recall this, the Fifth and Avon CAC had a discussion about Albemarle Business Campus after the fact, after the board had reached a decision. And two members of that basically wanted to deconstruct the decision-making that occurred around Albemarle Business Campus. And that was a case where, much to the credit of the applicant had provided a very detailed concept plan ahead of time. So there was no lack of clarity by this body, the Planning Commission, nor by the board as to what the intent was of the developer in terms of the site. The criticism of members of the CAC was they felt that the developer needed to spell out exactly the phases ahead of time and then be held to whatever was agreed to in the phases. And we had an active discussion that that's not necessarily a realistic model. But what I want to bring up, and again, this body may well recall from 2019, when we had an application for Southwood, there was a major push by members of the Planning Commission and by I as a supervisor at that time to try to have the applicant provide even a rough concept plan. It was never provided. And I felt we owed it to the neighbors and we owed it also to the taxpayers because we had county money involved here through the Economic Development Authority. So I would just submit that where under normal operating procedure, there doesn't need to be an X on page 9 under plan development districts and neighborhood model districts for concept plans. But if in fact there is Albemarle County support through the EDA involved with the project, that I feel there's an obligation for the applicant to be more forthcoming in terms of a concept plan that's provided both to the Planning Commission and to the Board of Supervisors.
Page 10, it starts to talk about an application plan showing a variety of things, and those are required for plan districts. The reason that you'll see the concept plan is not required for those, but an application plan, those are two different types of plans. An application plan has very specific and a higher standard of detail than a concept plan does. So plan districts always have to submit that higher level of detail, whereas special use permits and conventional rezonings don't have to submit that. They're not required. They don't have to submit application plans. They submit concept plans. And then what we have is in the other sections where the planning director can require additional plans and studies, that's where the planning director can say on a given case already, or with this language, would say, yes, you're a conventional zoning, but you're getting EDA funds. You need to give us the plan that addresses this. So instead of putting it in here as a concept plan as being the required, it's under the other plans and studies where the planning director can require an enhanced level of information given the unique characteristics of any particular application. So that's why you see the difference in the two types of plans.
But my next question to that point, and I appreciate your pointing that out, Bill, is to say, is it the concept plan that the Planning Commission would see, or is the application plan what the county will see at site review? It's a question of when. When is the application plan seen? Is it seen by the Planning Commission and the board?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that is an improvement. And that's something that I'm glad I raised the question then, because now we know going forward that if Charles signs on to this, that this body, as well as the board, would be provided with a much more thorough document that also can help inform the neighbors of exactly what the intention is with the application. Okay.
Yes, that information would be available at the planning commission stage.
Okay, terrific, terrific. Thank you very much for that. And I realize that I have one other question in here. Let me scroll over to it. On page 22, under D2, it says on the second sentence, before the Board of Supervisors public hearing, the agent may establish written guidelines that require signed proffers to be submitted a reasonable time prior to the public hearing to allow for review by counting officers and by the public. The only question I would have there is to try to ensure that those written guidelines make very explicit that that's provided 14 days prior to a board meeting, because I can again relate the experience of the Board of Supervisors clerks not getting the signed proffers taken care of in time for a board meeting and it being rushed on the clerks. We're putting 14 days above before the commission, but we're not saying that the applicant and that the agent have to get that information to the clerks so that they have adequate time to ensure that they can put it in the board packet. Just one thought on that. I noticed that and it just jumped out at me.
I can speak in generalities to that, and Charles and Andy may be able to say more, but I know this has been an issue for the Board of Supervisors, and we wanted to make sure there was that flexibility in there that the board could establish through the director what the timelines were. So that is carryover language from past actions by the board.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks.
I don't want to lose sight of the fact that there's that subtle piece that Rick brought up there, that when funds are being invested in a project from the county, that there's a hoped for a level of prep, a level of project refinement that would come before the planning commission and the supervisors. That's slightly different. Yes, you'd want it could be a what was it? It could be fall in that category where we would get it during the application. But there's the subtleness there that if county dollars are invested in it outright, that automatically shifts it into a different level, that there'd be an expectation for a deeper amount of information.
We would want if there were public funds being involved, it would be appropriate, in my opinion, it would be appropriate to get plans that addressed the aspects of the public fund that were going in there. So if the public funds were for a specific portion of the development, to provide transportation, then yes, we want to see that. If it's just public funds for jobs, maybe not. So we would want to tailor the type of plan to the particular type of funding that might be coming in.
But I would just to sort of extend the job piece out, I would hope that there would be some well-developed narrative in the proposal about how jobs might be lifted up and multiplied by this investment.
Sure, and it may be in the form of plans, or it may be in the form of the agreement that they gave it. So we would tailor it to the thing. And so again, this is where one of the lessons we learned was not to have the one-size-fits-all solution to every application, and to allow us to get the right information based on the scale and scope of the project that's before us.
All right, Charles, are you okay with that? You okay with that? All right. Are there other comments before we open it up to the public? No. I have simply one, And so, Bill, if you could just on page 2 of your staff report, where you say allow for review of projects while in a state of deferral. And so that's, my assumption is to permit that?
Yes.
Okay. I had a hard time reconciling that with on page 27 under C, where it says the application will not be further processed or reviewed by county staff.
And that is for public hearing purposes.
So that's for public hearing.
Yeah, that's.
So where in that, and where in 3311, where would I see that it's possible once it's deferred? Could you direct me to where I would be able to know that if I deferred, I could expect to have a conversation?
So 3311F.
Okay. The agent may determine, okay. So it is at the will of the planning director.
Yes. And that's to review a reactivated application. And then all time periods for action will be calculated from the reactivation of. But there's no provision in here. The other section is let me find it real quick here. So under C, the effect of timely receipt of request is, let me find it here real quick. Too many pages.
It's okay. Because this feels like different. So it feels like if we say something's been reactivated, so a step has been engaged by the applicant with Charles as the agent to say we want to reactivate our proposal, which feels like it's now moving out of the deferral stance. It's no longer in a deferral stance because it's in a reactivated stance.
I see what you're saying there. We could better clarify C1 about would not be further processed to verify to clarify that really is only for the public hearings.
If you would do that, I think that might be helpful because I was just trying to reconcile those two. Wearing another hat. Okay. Okay. Other questions, comments? And I'm going to ask, before I open it to a public hearing, do we have people who are waiting in the pub?
Nobody has their hand raised. Oh, wait, Mr. Williamson. Hold on.
I knew we did. So let's open for a public hearing, please, and let's go forward.
Okay, please state your name, address, and the organization you represent. You have 3 minutes to speak, and it starts now.
Neil Williamson, and I won't take 3 minutes. First and foremost, I want to thank Bill Fritz, who may never be allowed to retire based on his institutional knowledge. I find myself in an uncomfortable position of disagreeing with Mr. Fritz and his staff report regarding factors unfavorable. The removal of the requirement that the application must be acted on in 36 months or deemed the project is withdrawn has been incredibly troublesome. And I think we all have anecdotal information. We have been working behind the scenes trying to get this fixed. It was unintended consequences, as Mr. Randolph spoke of. This gets us well down that road. It's very helpful. And I think that's actually a factor that's favorable to this environment. With regard to public funds, I think the ideal of the EDA putting any kind of performance standards into the public-private partnership agreement would be better suited rather than using a broad term for public funds, which could include when the county chooses to do capital projects that may require some special use permits or the schools need to do something. So providing that flexibility, as Bill mentioned, the idea of one size does not fit all. With that being said, I do hope you'll see your way to recommend approval of this new ordinance. Thank you.
Any additional individuals care to come forward? Or is there anyone else out there?
No, there isn't.
So on that note, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to us for further conversations or further questions. Well, I see we're so overwhelmed. Bill, you've done your job.
Thank you. I had a lot of help. Andy Herrick, Bart Swoboda, Amelia McCulley, a lot of people helped on this project to make sure we dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's.
For the revision team, let's hope we can keep them all together, because it looks like we're going to be looking at a lot of zoning and ordinance rewrites over the next few years. So if we can get these done in less than a half an hour, you know, folks, we'll be welcoming these changes in a big way. Are there further comments or conversations? And if not, is somebody willing? So Rick, would you please?
I'll move approval of ZTA 2019-00008, section 2033.
I see it seconded by Tim. Are there any discussion? Please, we'll call the roll.
All right. Mr. Claiborne?
Aye.
Ms. Moore?
Aye.
Mr. Bivens?
Aye.
Mr. Randolph?
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, it's passed, Mr. Fritz. Thank you very much. And please extend our sincere appreciation to the team. And even though I see that Mr. Swoboda is there in name only, Bart, thank you. And thank you for all the various people that came alongside of you to make this happen. It's much appreciated. And we look, oh, and there's an empty room. Look, oh, there he is. and we'll look forward to continuing to do our work on this in the future.
I will pass it along to the team, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any committee? Whoa, wait, no. Charles, you have anything to tell us?
I actually went back. We haven't had a board meeting since our last one. So we'll be meeting with the Board of Supervisors tomorrow, talk about a popular topic of Crozet's master plan. And then we will reconvene as a commission next Tuesday to start one of several conversations about our comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance update that we have, 2 major projects. So look forward to that.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any reports or anything that you'd like to update us with? Wow. Wow, this is amazing here. Do we have any items for follow-up? Well, our next planning commission, get moving right along. Since it's summer, you know, we might as well just get out of here a little bit earlier on this summer evening. Our next meeting is April 13th. And while it says on our agendas we should adjourn at 8 o'clock, I don't think anyone has any issue with us adjourning a bit early. Does anyone have something that they'd like to extend our meeting with? Guess not. And then in that case, our meeting is adjourned. Everyone, I don't have a record, but probably Tim and others have a record. This feels like a fast one to me. This feels like a really fast one to me. And so thank you. See you next week. And until then, you know, wear sunscreen because it's 80 degrees outside. And that also means start wearing tick protection, because I pulled one of those little things off just yesterday. So they're back. I wish the cicadas would eat them, but they're not. Cicadas don't eat ticks, but if they did, we'd be in all good shape in a few months. Everyone, be safe and see you. Stay masked. Get in line for the vaccine. For the guy who gave us pennies to go get vaccinated. Go to Pennies and get vaccinated if you haven't already. I think you're going to be able to do that soon. But in any event, thanks everyone. Have a good evening. And Charles, we need to set a time. I got a couple of questions for you. Bye, Bart. Let's set over. Bye, Bart. Have a good night. See you later.
Night.
I'm getting you a guinea.